All right, today we're going to be talking again about personality, but this time we're going to look through the scope of the trait theory. Rather than focusing on unconscious forces, some researchers are more concerned with defining personality and behavior patterns. One such psychologist is Gordon Allport, who visited Freud. He believed he dove too deeply into behavior. He defined personality into grouping of traits like the Keirsey temperament sorter that we did. There's another one called the Myers Briggs, which is used a lot of times in counseling, leadership, training, and work team development that helps develop traits of personalities. So, what is a trait? It is a characteristic, a pattern of behavior, or a disposition to feel or an act in a certain way you assess by self report inventory, like a survey, or you have somebody do a peer report. So, as we look at the trait approach, there are possible dimensions that factor into your traits. Traits theory, such as Gordon Allport, Isabel Briggs Myers, or the mother of Catherine Briggs, were concerned less with explaining these individual traits than describing them. So, again, we're going back to we're not really wanting to know where they come from. We're just going to describe these traits. So, what they do is they classify people into personality types. And each of these quadrants, if you will, determine what kind of personality you have. So, as we take a look, we are going back to the introvert extrovert idea. I think we pretty much understand that. But then we're looking at quadrants that include what we call stable and unstable. This is what we call the factor analysis. It is a statistical procedure that identifies clusters of items into components. Hans Eysenck developed what is called the axis of personality genetically influenced. And this is what it looks like. And so what you see here is groupings of traits into the introvert, extrovert, stable, and unstable. And as you look at the different categories of terms, whether or not, again, introvert, extrovert means whether your energy comes from within or outside sources. Unstable versus stable, or typically have to deal with personalities that you struggle with. So they've gone through and they've tested in many countries to look at developing these factors analysis. Again, here's a better definition of what introversion is. Typically, yeah, this is one that we typically think of people being shy as being introverted. That's not the case at all. Introversion all has to do with where your levels of stimulation come from. An extrovert, this is a great example. Just because someone is successful, fun, and talks a lot, don't mean that they are extroverted. Okay. And again, a lot of this has to do with cultural influences as well. All right, so let's take a look at what an inventory is. An inventory is like you took last Wednesday. It is a questionnaire, a self-report, sometimes can be a peer report as well, used to assess personality traits. The classic personality inventory is the MMPI, or the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And the MMPI used a lot of times in research and clinics, objectively personality assessment. There's no subject where the tester is doing any kind of analysis or whatever. That's what objective means. You put down an answer and that's what it is. There's no analysis part of it. Empirically derived tests, like the MMPI, selects from a pool of items those that discriminate between groups. Personality inventories are scored objectively, like I said. Even though it's objective, it doesn't mean it is valid. So yes, just like we did the assessment last Wednesday, that may have not been you. So there's a pretty good chance, pretty reliable, but it doesn't make it valid. All right, so let's take a look at the big five personality factors. So we're going to go back to this big five here in the next couple of days to do some more personality assessment. It's slightly expanded from the Eysenck two-factor assessment. This is the most common in active research since 1990s and best approximation of the trait dimensions. The big five talks about conscientiousness, whether you're disorganized, careless, or impulsive, to the range of organized, carefully disciplined. So you're seeing the wide scope of influences of these traits: agreeableness, ruthless versus soft-hearted, neuroticism, emotionally stable versus unstable. If you go back to Eysenck's two-factor theory, you see that stability versus instability, whether or not you're calm or you're very anxious in the spectrum. Practical refers to routine or conforming, whether or not you're open versus imaginative, you prefer variety, and so on. And then you have the extroversion, whether you're retiring, sober, reserved, or more social, fun-loving, and affectionate. Okay. All right, so let's move on. Talk about, again, are these traits consistent over time, or can we change over time? Our personality seems relatively stable over time, but we do find evidences of people changing their personalities over time as well. Do traits equal behavior? Although our traits may be both stable and strong, the consistency of our behaviors from one situation to the next is another matter. This is another one that, as we take a look at the nature versus nurture aspect of the trait approach to personality, is how much does our environment influence the expression of our traits? We've talked about this way back in the beginning of our class, is that perhaps that the culture, our traits are dormant, but in certain situations, the environment may bring them out. Uh, and so, therefore, the environment does encourage the expression of certain traits that may be dormant. Okay, that is a little bit about the trait approach. And we'll move on to the social cognitive in our next lesson.